We are back on Taking Care of Business on Koerner Radio, News Talk, 1180, 1230 KGEO, 1410 KERI, 1000 KKIM, and now on the Internet in the San Francisco Bay Area. We're having a conversation with our in-studio guest, Sam Young, who is a Holocaust survivor. So, Sam, you were talking about that doctor that rescued you.
Yes. I could talk for a long time about the doctor.
And you're interesting.
But due to the time constraints, let me just tell you that we stayed with this doctor for 1 year in his house, and my father practiced medicine there, and to describe the conditions there is something that it's unbelievable that people could live under the circumstances what the Germans did, and how these Germans took everything away from the Jews, and then they tried to starve out starve out the population, and they didn't permit them and freeze them out because the temperature there was 40 below day after day, day after day.
Do you know whatever happened to the other people that were with you?
Yes, the other people were taken to Kamenets-Podolsk, which was not very far from Diagelnica, where we were, and they were told that they should come to the center of the village, because they are being taken back to Hungary. So they were very happy, and they got to the center of town or the village, and the Germans came with trucks and surrounded this whole group and took out machine guns, everybody, with the exception of two young men who went to get some water and saw what the Germans were doing, and those two boys survived, and they witnessed what happened. But close to 300 people were machine gunned by the Germans in Kamenets-Podolsk. And just lately, they here in the United States found an Ukrainian guy who helped the Germans in this massacre, and he was arrested here in the United States.
Oh, yeah, he ended up in prison, yeah.
Yes.
For those two boys, that's muscle, right?
Yeah.
That's muscle, that's love.
Okay.
So, and unfortunately, we could sit here with you for 2 hours, but let's jump ahead a little bit because, we're talking about 1941, but now looking at 1944, something you told me that when you and I met at your home the other day that stuck with me, you were talking about that drive of survival that you had. You were talking about the beatings that you had from the Nazis, and you...
Now we are jumping. First we were at 1941 and 42,
right,
when we were able to get back to Hungary, and then I served in the first... the Hungarians drafted me to the military.
As a worker?
Yes, as a worker, not as a fighting soldier. And I was in the military, and then I escaped from the military, and I worked I was a member of the underground, which was the responsibility of trying to save as many Jews as we possibly could. And at that time, naturally, we operated with false papers, and this whole organization was underground. And I was caught by the Nazis. And when the Nazis interrogated me, then were beating me over the head. And I can't explain how this thing works, but the funny thing is that I remember standing there. They tried to find out about the underground, but I was able to give answers where it was absolutely false, and I was imprisoned by them for 3 days, and by speaking fluently German, I was able to escape. To tell you the details would be quite complicated, but the interesting thing was that I didn't have any food for 3 days. I didn't sleep for 3 days, but I wasn't tired. I wasn't hungry, and was just constantly looking how to be able to escape.
To stay alive.
Stay alive. And by coincidence, because I spoke fluently German, I was able to escape from there. But after that, after I escaped, suddenly the pain in my head, and I noticed that my ears were my skin was off my ears, and that was in December of 1944. I could not do anything anymore because I was so scared of everything that I could hardly, or I really didn't walk out from hiding.
Yeah.
So the thing of living is so strong that you can overcome unbelievable things.
That drive of survival.
Yeah.
We're having a conversation in studio with Sam Young, a Holocaust survivor. Sam, we could have you here for 2 hours and still not scratch the surface. I want to ask you a couple questions. You and I talked about, Eichmann came in 1944, and that's when Hungary really started exporting Jews for the
Yes,
Holocaust.
when Eichmann came in.
Yes, in 1944.
Yeah, in 1944, when Eichmann came in.
Right.
You see, when Horthy saw that basically the war was lost, and he escaped, Eichmann came into Budapest, and they put in the Nazi Party in charge, and then they took the Jews from Hungary to Auschwitz and the whole.
Auschwitz, yeah. I remember as a kid watching the Eichmann trials when the Israelis got him from Argentina and brought him back to Israel. Do you think the media and the governments could have done more to prevent the Holocaust or do something to stop the slaughter during the war?
Now, this is very hard for me to answer. Yes, but possibly, if the Allies would have put more pressure on Germany, and you see, we constantly consider that the Holocaust was strictly against Jews. This is not true. This is not true, because it's true that Hitler first took everything from the Jews, but then he wanted to starve out the Slavs, yes? And then Hitler felt that he can create a Germany where strictly the Germans will rule the whole thing. And if you read the history, Hitler said that he can create a Germany which will dominate Europe for 1,000 years.
Yeah. So, and you and I talked earlier about how, they could have at least bombed Auschwitz or bombed the railroad lines, and they didn't do that. They went after military targets and didn't go after targets that would save the Jews.
I can understand that because Hitler was bombing England, yes?
Yes.
In fact, my mother, when she was in concentration camp in Auschwitz, she was assigned to a division where they were making the V-2, the rockets.
Right.
The rockets in Zittau. Zittau was a town in the Czech where they were manufacturing the V-2, and my mother as a prisoner and my sister also worked in that department in Zittau where the rockets were made.
Yeah, so I can understand that decision. We've got about 2 minutes left, and I have another question that you and I talked about earlier. Could we have stopped Hitler? Chamberlain appeased him, gave him everything he wanted. Could we have stopped Hitler before the war started, do you think?
This is very hard for me to answer, but there is no question, because I remember the things Chamberlain, like it would have been yesterday, when he went to deal with Hitler, and Hitler told him that all he wants is the Sudeten, where the Germans lived, and then he will make peace. Yes, and Chamberlain came back and he says we will have peace for the next 1,000 years.
Right.
So Chamberlain was an idiot.
Yeah, he was an idiot.
You know, the Iranian government said the Holocaust has never happened. If you had an opportunity right now to say something to the Iranian government, what would you say?
That they should look at history. They should look at facts.
Yeah. Very good question, Claude.
Well, thank you.
Excellent question. We've got about 30 seconds left. Sam, thank you so much for doing this. I mean, you're a walking history book, and
may I make a deal?
Please.
I consider myself exceptionally lucky, yes? And not only do I think that I am very lucky, but there are certain people, certain things happened in my life where without those things, I wouldn't be here today. So I feel that I have the responsibility to tell the things what I know.
Yes.
In many places where I spoke about things, they wanted to pay me, you know?
Yes.
And I never wanted to.
Unfortunately, I have to cut you off there. Okay. But thank you for doing this without getting paid.
I never expected to be paid for
We'll see you in 167 hours on Taking Care of Business on Koerner Radio News Talk 1180.